Welcome. And thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate you choosing to spend your time with this video. Whether you're here to unwind, to learn something new, or simply to enjoy a moment of calm. If you find these peaceful history documentaries relaxing or helpful, please consider subscribing and giving the video a like. It supports the channel more than you know and helps these tranquil journeys reach others who may need them as well. Now, take a deep breath, settle in, and enjoy the story. You are standing in the quiet dark of an April night. The air is soft, heavy with the scent of rain and lilac, and somewhere far off, a church bell tolls the hour. Each note fades slowly into silence, echoing across the city like the heartbeat of a weary nation. The year's 1865. The war, that long, terrible storm that has raged for 4 endless years, is finally drawing to its close. The cannons have gone quiet. The fields are greening again. Across the land, candles burn in windows, small beacons of relief, of disbelief, of fragile hope. Here in Washington, the streets glisten with rain. Carriage wheels clatter softly over wet cobblestones. Behind shuttered windows, voices murmur. Tired voices, uncertain, yet lighter than they have been in years. The air itself seems to breathe easier, as if the whole country has exhaled at last. And in the tall White House at the end of Pennsylvania Avenue, one man sits awake while others sleep. His desk is littered with papers, telegrams, drafts, half-finished letters. The lamplight glows over deep lines carved into his face, over eyes that have seen too much death and still hold compassion. His name is Abraham Lincoln. He pauses in his writing. Perhaps he listens to the rain. Perhaps he's thinking about how to heal a nation that has torn itself apart. His great hands, the same hands that once split rails, that once held his children close, now rest on words meant to bind up the wounds of millions. Tonight, you'll walk beside him. You'll trace the long road that brought him here, from a log cabin on the Kentucky frontier to the presidency of a nation at war. You'll see him not as the marble monument or the figure on a penny, but as a man of extraordinary gentleness and endurance. So breathe deeply now. Let the noise of the present fall away. The glow of screens fades, replaced by the flicker of lamplight on worn wood. The hum of modern life gives way to the soft crackle of a fire and the whisper of wind through bare branches. You are stepping backward through time to a world of dirt roads and candlelight, of grief and grace, of hope reborn in the quiet heart of a weary America. The story begins not in Washington, not in the marble halls of power, but in the wilderness of Kentucky, in the winter of 1809. Snow lies heavy on the branches of bare trees, and in a one-room cabin made of rough-cut logs, a child is born. The cabin is small, barely 14 feet on each side, with a dirt floor and a single window covered with oiled paper. There is a stone fireplace at one end, its flames providing the only light and warmth against the bitter cold outside. You can smell the wood smoke, thick and sweet, mingling with the scent of melting tallow from a single candle. The wind finds every crack in the walls, whistling through gaps between the logs, and outside, the dark forest presses close. Filled with the sounds of night, the distant call of an owl, the crack of ice on tree branches, the soft sigh of wind through pine needles. The child who enters the world on this cold February morning will be named Abraham, after his grandfather who was killed by native warriors when his father was only a boy. He comes into a world of hardship and uncertainty, where survival depends on strong backs and stronger wills, where comfort is a luxury almost no one can afford, where the line between life and death is often as thin as the difference between a good harvest and a failed one. His father, Thomas Lincoln, is a carpenter and farmer, a man of limited education but considerable skill with his hands. His mother, Nancy Hanks Lincoln, is quiet and gentle, with dark hair and deep-set eyes that her son will inherit. She can barely write her own name, but she has a love of stories and a way of speaking that plants seeds in her children's minds. Seeds that will grow into something neither she nor anyone else could predict. As you watch this scene from the warmth of your own rest, feel yourself sinking deeper into comfort. The cabin fades, the firelight dims, and time begins to flow like a river, carrying you forward through the years. Young Abraham grows up in the wilderness, and the wilderness shapes him. When he is 7 years old, the family moves north across the Ohio River to Indiana, to a tract of land covered in dense forest. There are no cleared fields here, no cabin waiting. Everything must be carved from the wild. You can see Thomas and Abraham working side by side, their axes rising and falling in steady rhythm. The sound echoes through the forest, a sharp crack followed by a duller thud as steel bites into wood. Chips of white wood scatter across the ground, and slowly, tree by tree, a small clearing emerges. They build a 3-sided shelter first, open on one side, where a fire burns day and night, and for weeks the family lives like this, exposed to wind and rain, and the constant smoke that stings their eyes and coats their clothes with ash. Abraham is tall for his age, growing faster than seems natural, all long limbs and large hands and feet. He learns early what it means to work until your back aches and your hands bleed, until exhaustion becomes a familiar companion. But even as he swings the axe and hauls logs and helps his father split rails for fencing, his mind is elsewhere. He is thinking about the stories his mother tells, about the words in the few books he has seen, about the mysterious symbols on the page that seem to hold entire worlds inside them. He learns to read from a spelling book, forming letters on a wooden board with a piece of charcoal, because paper is too precious to waste. He reads the Bible aloud to his mother by firelight, his young voice stumbling over unfamiliar words, but persistent, always persistent. He reads a borrowed copy of Aesop's fables so many times he can recite whole passages from memory. He finds a biography of George Washington and reads it until the pages are worn soft as cloth, until he knows every story, every detail of that other tall man from Virginia who helped build a nation. And then, when Abraham is 9 years old, his mother dies. It happens quickly, cruelly, as death often did in those days. An illness sweeps through the community, milk sickness they call it, caused by cows eating white snaker root and passing the poison through their milk. Nancy Lincoln lies on a rough bed in the corner of the cabin, growing weaker each day, and there is nothing anyone can do. Abraham and his older sister Sarah sit beside her, watching helplessly as the light fades from her eyes. Feel the weight of that loss, but softly, gently. Feel it the way you might feel the sadness in an old song. Something distant enough not to wound, but present enough to touch your heart. The cabin seems emptier after she is gone, darker even when the fire burns bright. The forest presses closer. Thomas grows silent and withdrawn, and the children try to fill the spaces their mother left behind. But the spaces are too large, too profound. For more than a year, they live in a kind of limbo. Abraham's sister Sarah, only 11 years old herself, tries to keep the household together. Abraham grows taller and quieter, spending long hours alone when he can, walking through the forest, or lying on his back watching clouds move across the sky. He's learning what it means to carry sadness, to feel the absence of someone you loved like a permanent ache in your chest. It is a lesson he will never forget, one that will shape the way he sees the world and the people in it. But life has a way of continuing, even after loss. Thomas Lincoln travels back to Kentucky and returns with a new wife, Sarah Bush Johnston, a widow with 3 children of her own. She brings with her a wagon load of belongings that seem like impossible luxuries to Abraham and his sister. Real furniture, feather mattresses, dishes, and most precious of all, books. Sarah Bush Lincoln takes one look at the dirty, ragged children in the cabin and immediately sets about transforming their lives. She washes them, clothes them properly, and treats them with a kindness and respect they have not known since their mother died. And most importantly, she recognizes something in Abraham, something his father does not quite understand or value: the boy's fierce hunger for learning. She encourages him to read, defends him when Thomas complains about time wasted on books, and creates space in his life for the life of the mind. Abraham later says that she was the best friend he ever had. And you can see why. In a world where education is often seen as unnecessary for a farmer's son, where most people believe a boy should be content to follow his father's path, she sees further. She sees what he might become. Let yourself sink deeper into rest as you watch Abraham grow through his teenage years. See him working in the fields, his long body bent over a plow, sweat running down his face under the hot Indiana sun. See him at night, lying on his stomach in front of the fireplace, a borrowed book propped open before him, so absorbed he does not hear his name being called. See him at the general store, where people gather to hear him tell stories, his voice animated, his gestures broad, making even the most ordinary tale somehow funny and memorable. He has a gift for words, for finding the exact phrase that will make people laugh, or think, or see something in a new way. He remembers everything he reads, every story he hears, every conversation. His mind is like rich soil that has been waiting for seeds, and now, fed by every book he can beg or borrow, it blooms with ideas. He reads Robinson Crusoe and dreams of adventure. He reads the revised laws of Indiana and begins to understand how society organizes itself, how justice is supposed to work. He reads poetry and commits long passages to memory, reciting them to himself as he works. He copies out passages he particularly loves onto paper scraps and carries them in his pockets, pulling them out during breaks in labor to read again and memorize. The rhythm of his days is the rhythm of rural life. Planting and harvest, the ring of the axe in winter, the smell of turned earth in spring. But his thoughts are elsewhere, reaching towards something he cannot quite name, some future he can barely imagine. When Abraham is 19, he takes a flatboat down the Mississippi River to New Orleans, hired to help transport cargo for a local merchant. The journey takes weeks, floating slowly southward on the vast brown current of the river, past forests and settlements, past other boats and rafts, past the opening mouths of tributary streams. You are there with him on the deck of the flatboat, feeling the sun on your face and the gentle rock of the boat beneath your feet. The air smells of river water and wood, and the cargo they carry. At night, they tie up along the shore, and Abraham lies on his back, watching stars wheel across the sky, listening to the sounds of the river, the slap of water against the hull, the calls of night birds, the distant splash of something large moving through the shallows. And then they reach New Orleans, and Abraham sees things that will stay with him for the rest of his life. The city is overwhelming to a boy from the backwoods. Its size, its noise, its crowds of people speaking languages he has never heard. But what strikes him most, what burns into his memory like a brand, is the slave market. He sees human beings standing on auction blocks, families torn apart, children sold away from their mothers, men and women inspected like livestock, and purchased with casual indifference by buyers who see them as nothing more than property. The image haunts him. Years later, he will tell friends that if he ever got a chance to hit slavery, he would hit it hard. The seed is planted here, on this trip down the river, in the heat and noise of a New Orleans slave market. It will take decades to grow and bear fruit, but it is planted now, deep in the soil of his conscience. Feel yourself drifting now, your breathing slow and even, your body heavy and relaxed. The images flow past like scenes, viewed from a moving train, each one vivid but dreamlike, carrying you gently forward through time. Abraham leaves the wilderness of Indiana when he is 21, moving with his family to Illinois. By now, he has grown into his full height, 6 feet 4 inches tall, impossibly lanky, all long arms and legs and enormous hands. His face is not handsome in any conventional sense. His features are too large, too asymmetric, his skin weathered and coarse from years of outdoor labor. But there is something compelling about him, something people remember. Perhaps it is his eyes, deeply set and gray-blue, that seem to see more than most. Perhaps it is the way he listens when people talk, with full attention, as though what they are saying matters profoundly. He works as a laborer, a store clerk, a postmaster. He splits rails for fencing, earning a reputation for his strength and stamina. They say he can sink an axe deeper into wood than any man in the county, that he can lift weights other men cannot budge. But physical strength is not what distinguishes him. What sets him apart is his mind, his memory, his ability to tell a story that makes people laugh until their sides ache, and his absolute, almost stubborn devotion to honesty. In the small settlement of New Salem, Illinois, he works in a general store, and when he accidentally overcharges a customer by a few cents, he walks miles that evening to return the money. When he gives a woman the wrong amount of tea, he delivers the correct measure to her home as soon as he realizes the error. People start calling him Honest Abe, and the nickname sticks because it is true. Because in a rough frontier society where sharp dealing is common and expected, his integrity is remarkable. He begins to study law, borrowing books from a local lawyer, reading them while lying on his back under a tree or sitting on a stump behind the store. He has no formal teacher, no law school to attend. He simply reads and thinks and reads some more. He walks 20 miles to attend court sessions, watching lawyers argue cases, learning by observation how the law works in practice. And slowly, almost without realizing it, he begins to shape himself into something new. The awkward frontier boy is becoming a man of learning, a man of words and ideas, someone who can stand before a jury and make them see a case his way, someone who can draft a legal document with precision and clarity. Let these images wash over you like gentle waves. Abraham walking down a dusty road with a book under his arm. Abraham lying in the grass outside the store, reading until the light fails. Abraham practicing speeches to an audience of trees, trying out different phrasings, different gestures, teaching himself the art of persuasion. In 1834, at the age of 25, Abraham is elected to the Illinois state legislature. It is his first real step into political life, and it opens doors he could hardly have imagined as a child in that Kentucky cabin. He serves 4 terms, learning the complicated dance of legislation, making friends and allies, developing a reputation as a skilled debater and a principled, if not always successful, advocate for his positions. He moves to Springfield, the new state capital, and establishes a law practice. Springfield is not a large city by Eastern standards, only a few thousand people, but to Abraham it seems almost metropolitan. There are brick buildings, proper streets, people of education and culture. He rooms above a store with another young lawyer named Joshua Speed, and the two become close friends, staying up late into the night, talking about law and politics and philosophy and life. You can see them there in their room, lamplight casting warm circles on the walls, their conversation punctuated by long, comfortable silences. Abraham sits with his long legs stretched out, hands clasped behind his head, staring at the ceiling as he works through an argument or a problem. His melancholy is apparent sometimes, settling over him like a fog, pulling him down into silence and introspection. Speed learns to recognize these moods and give his friend space, understanding that Abraham carries sadness the way some men carry scars. It is simply part of him, woven into the fabric of his being. During this period, Abraham meets Mary Todd, a young woman from a wealthy Kentucky family who has come to Springfield to live with her sister. Mary is educated, cultured, passionate about politics, and fiercely intelligent. She speaks French, loves poetry, and has strong opinions about everything from fashion to the future of the nation. She is also small, plump, and prone to mood swings that range from charming vivacity to sharp-tongued anger. Their courtship is turbulent. Abraham proposes, then breaks the engagement, plunging into such deep depression that his friends fear for his life. For months he barely functions, wrestling with doubts about marriage, about his worthiness, about his ability to make another person happy when he cannot always manage happiness himself. But eventually, almost suddenly, they reconcile and marry in 1842, in a ceremony held in Mary's sister's parlor. Feel the weight of Abraham's uncertainty his fear of commitment and failure. Feel the way love and doubt can coexist in the human heart. How we can want something desperately and fear it at the same time. His marriage to Mary will be complicated, marked by genuine affection and partnership, but also by tension and periodic conflict. She pushes him, believes in his potential for greatness, manages their household and his political ambitions with determination. He retreats sometimes into himself, into his work, into long silences that frustrate and worry her. They have 4 sons together: Robert, Eddie, Willie, and Ted. The house fills with the chaos of children, toys scattered on floors, shouts and laughter echoing through rooms, small bodies hurtling downstairs and through doorways. Abraham is by most accounts a lenient, affectionate father, playing games with his boys, telling them stories, letting them climb on him while he tries to read. When Eddie dies, at age 3, of what was probably tuberculosis, both parents are devastated. Abraham holds Mary while she weeps, and his own grief settles deeper into that reservoir of sadness he carries always, adding to the weight. Let yourself drift now, floating through the years like a leaf on a stream. The scenes flow past, each one clear but dreamy, each one part of the larger current carrying Abraham Lincoln toward his destiny. He builds his law practice, riding the circuit, traveling from county to county with other lawyers and a judge, staying in rough taverns and boarding houses, trying cases in small-town courthouses. He becomes known as an excellent trial lawyer, particularly good with juries, able to present complex legal issues in plain language that ordinary people can understand. He tells jokes and stories between cases, becomes popular with the other lawyers and judges, earns a solid reputation and a decent living. But politics keeps pulling at him. He serves 1 term in Congress, from 1847 to 1849, where he criticizes the Mexican-American War and finds himself unpopular back home for doing so. He returns to Springfield, thinking his political career might be over, focusing on his law practice and his growing family. Then, in 1854, everything changes. Congress passes the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which opens up new territories to slavery based on popular sovereignty, letting the settlers themselves vote on whether to allow slavery. This effectively repeals the Missouri Compromise of 1820, which had prohibited slavery in certain territories, and threatens to expand the institution into areas where it had been forbidden. Abraham is morally outraged. All those years of quiet opposition to slavery, all those memories of the New Orleans slave market, all his reading of the Declaration of Independence, and its assertion that all men are created equal. Everything comes together into a white-hot core of conviction. He begins speaking out against the Kansas-Nebraska Act, giving speeches that are longer, more carefully reasoned, and more passionate than anything he has done before. You can hear his voice, earnest and high-pitched, not melodious, but compelling in its sincerity. He argues that slavery is morally wrong, that it contradicts the fundamental principles of American democracy, that allowing it to expand will poison the nation's future. He does not call for immediate abolition in the South. He is too practical, too aware of the constitutional protections for slavery where it already exists. But he insists that it should not spread, that it should be placed on a path toward eventual extinction. In 1858, Abraham challenges Stephen Douglas for his Senate seat. Douglas is a powerful, well-known politician, a skilled debater, and the architect of the Kansas-Nebraska Act. The campaign includes 7 debates held in towns across Illinois, and these debates become the most famous political debates in American history. You are standing in the crowd on a hot August afternoon, pressed between other bodies, straining to hear as the 2 men face each other on a wooden platform. Douglas is short and stocky, impeccably dressed, with a deep voice and a commanding presence. Abraham is impossibly tall and gangly, wearing a suit that does not quite fit properly, his hair never completely tamed. But when he speaks, something happens. The audience leans forward. People stop their murmuring and shifting. His words cut through the air with clarity and moral force. A house divided against itself cannot stand, he says, quoting scripture and applying it to the nation. I believe this government cannot endure, permanently half slave and half free. I do not expect the Union to be dissolved. I do not expect the house to fall. But I do expect it will cease to be divided. It will become all one thing, or all the other. He loses the Senate race. The Illinois legislature chooses Douglas, not Lincoln. But the debates make Abraham nationally known. People across the country read transcripts of his speeches and recognized something in them: a moral clarity, a commitment to the principles of the Declaration of Independence, a willingness to stand against the expansion of slavery, even when it is politically difficult. Feel yourself settling deeper into rest now. Your breathing is slow and steady, your muscles loose and heavy. The story continues to unfold, but you are drifting with it, not struggling, simply allowing it to carry you. In 1860, Abraham Lincoln is nominated as the Republican candidate for president. It is almost unbelievable. 2 years ago, he lost a Senate race. He has served one undistinguished term in Congress and has no executive experience. He comes from a frontier state, not from the established power centers of the East. But the Republican Party is new and fractured, and Abraham emerges from a crowded field, partly because he has fewer enemies than the other candidates, partly because he has positioned himself as a moderate who opposes the expansion of slavery but does not threaten the South's existing institution. The campaign is bitter and divisive. The nation is splitting apart over slavery, over states' rights, over the question of what America is supposed to be. Southern states threaten to secede if the Republicans win. Stephen Douglas, running as a Northern Democrat, warns that Abraham's election will destroy the Union. The country holds its breath. In November, Abraham wins. He carries every northern state except New Jersey, which splits. He does not receive a single vote in 10 southern states. He was not even on the ballot there. He has won with less than 40% of the popular vote, in an election that reveals how fractured the nation has become. You can see him receiving the news in Springfield, standing in the telegraph office reading the returns as they come in. There is no celebration, no triumphant joy. His face is grave, his eyes troubled. He knows what is coming. He knows that his election will be the spark that ignites the fire, that the threats of secession are real, that he is about to inherit a crisis that may destroy the republic. Before he even takes office, 7 southern states secede from the Union. They form the Confederate States of America, elect their own president, seize federal property within their borders. The country Abraham is about to lead is already broken. In February 1861, he leaves Springfield for Washington. It is raining, a cold, steady rain that turns the streets to mud and hangs heavy in the air. He stands on the back platform of the train that will carry him east, looking at the small crowd that has gathered to see him off. These are his neighbors, people he has known for years, and his voice breaks as he speaks to them. My friends, no one, not in my situation, can appreciate my feeling of sadness at this parting. To this place, and the kindness of these people, I owe everything. Here I have lived a quarter of a century, and have passed from a young to an old man. Here, my children have been born, and one is buried. I now leave, not knowing when or whether ever I may return. The train pulls away, and Springfield disappears behind him in the rain. Let yourself sink deeper now, your body completely relaxed, your mind drifting through these images like clouds across a darkening sky. There is no need to hold on to anything, no need to remember every detail. Simply allow the story to wash over you, gentle and soothing. Abraham arrives in Washington before dawn, brought in secretly because there have been threats against his life, rumors of assassination plots. The inauguration takes place in March under heavy security, with sharpshooters positioned on rooftops. In his inaugural address, he pleads with the South not to force the issue into war, but he is also clear. He will not allow the Union to be permanently destroyed. We are not enemies, but friends, he says. We must not be enemies. Though passion may have strained, it must not break our bonds of affection. The mystic chords of memory stretching from every battlefield and patriot grave to every living heart and hearthstone, all over this broad land, will yet swell the chorus of this union. When again touched, as surely they will be, by the better angels of our nature. But the better angels do not prevail. In April, Confederate forces attack Fort Sumter in Charleston Harbor. The war begins. For 4 years, Abraham Lincoln carries a burden few presidents have ever borne. He is leading a nation at war with itself, trying to preserve the Union while wrestling with the impossible complexities of military strategy, political pressure, and the moral question of slavery. He works 18-hour days, sleeping little, aging visibly under the strain. His secretaries find him at midnight, bent over maps and dispatches, or staring out the window into darkness, lost in thought. The war goes badly at first. The Union Army loses battle after battle. Generals prove incompetent or overcautious or both. Casualty lists grow longer and longer, until the numbers become almost incomprehensible. Thousands die at Shiloh, at Antietam, at Fredericksburg. Hospitals overflow with wounded and dying men. Every family seems to have someone in uniform, someone in danger, someone who might never come home. Abraham visits hospitals when he can, walking among the beds, shaking hands with wounded soldiers, listening to their stories. His face shows every bit of his pain. He cannot hide it, does not try to. The suffering of these young men tears at him. He writes letters to their families, hundreds of letters to parents whose sons have died, and every one of them is personal, heartfelt, acknowledging the unique grief of each loss. You can see him late at night, in his office on the second floor of the White House, his tall frame bent over a desk, pen moving slowly across paper in the lamplight. Outside the window, Washington sleeps uneasily, a city transformed by war into something crowded and tense, filled with soldiers and refugees, and the constant rumble of supply wagons. Inside, Abraham writes, "I feel how weak and fruitless must be any words of mine which should attempt to beguile you from the grief of a loss so overwhelming." He struggles to find generals who can win battles. He cycles through commanders, trying one after another. McClellan, Pope, Burnside, Hooker. Each one disappoints in different ways. McClellan has the slows, as Abraham puts it, always needing more men, more time, more preparation. Others are simply overmatched or make terrible decisions. The losses mount. The nation grows weary. Political opponents call for Lincoln to negotiate peace, to let the South go, to end the slaughter. But Abraham will not give up. The Union must be preserved. The government of the people, by the people, and for the people must survive. If it fails here, if this republic dissolves into warring fragments, then the whole experiment of democracy is proven unworkable, and tyranny and autocracy will be validated as the only stable forms of government. That is the larger meaning of the war, the reason it must be fought to conclusion. The future of self-government itself is at stake. Feel yourself drifting deeper into sleep now, carried on the current of the story. The images become softer, more dreamlike, blending into one another. There is no need to hold on, no need to stay alert. Simply let go and allow yourself to rest. In the summer of 1862, while the war rages on, Abraham begins drafting the Emancipation Proclamation. He has been moving toward this for years, pushed by circumstances and by his own evolving understanding of what the war must ultimately be about. It cannot be only about preserving the Union, he has come to believe. It must also be about ending slavery. Otherwise, even if the Union is preserved, the poison at its heart will remain. He writes in careful legal language, declaring that as of January 1st, 1863, all persons held as slaves in states still in rebellion will be forever free. It is a war measure, justified by his authority as commander-in-chief, and it only applies to areas in rebellion, a necessary legal compromise. But its moral and practical implications are enormous. It transforms the war from a conflict about political union into a crusade for human freedom. When he signs the document on New Year's Day 1863, his hand trembles slightly, not from nervousness, but because he has been shaking hands for hours at a White House reception, and his arm is tired. He pauses before signing, aware that this moment will echo through history. "If my name ever goes into history," he says to those standing nearby, "it will be for this act, and my whole soul is in it." The proclamation changes everything. It gives the war a moral purpose that resonates around the world. It makes clear that Union victory will mean the end of slavery. It allows black men to enlist in the Union Army and Navy, and nearly 200,000 of them do, fighting with courage and determination for their own freedom and for the survival of the Union. Abraham meets with black leaders, listens to their concerns, learns from them, grows in his understanding. But the war is far from over. In 1863, the Battle of Gettysburg costs more than 50,000 casualties in 3 days of fighting. A few months later, Abraham travels to Gettysburg to help dedicate a cemetery for the fallen soldiers. He is not the main speaker. That honor goes to Edward Everett, a famous orator who speaks for 2 hours. Abraham speaks for only 2 minutes, delivering 272 words that redefine the meaning of the war and the nation itself. You can hear his high, clear voice carrying across the crowd. 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. He speaks of the soldiers who died here, of their sacrifice, of the work that remains to be done, and he concludes with words that will be remembered as long as people speak English, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people shall not perish from the earth. The crowd is quiet when he finishes. Some are disappointed, thinking the speech too short, but others recognize immediately that they have witnessed something extraordinary. Edward Everett writes to Abraham the next day, "I should be glad if I could flatter myself that I came as near to the central idea of the occasion in 2 hours as you did in 2 minutes. Let the weight of your body press down into your bed. Let your muscles go completely loose. Breathe slowly, deeply, and allow the story to continue washing over you like gentle waves on a shore. You are safe, comfortable, drifting toward sleep." In the White House, Abraham lives with his own private griefs alongside the public ones. In February 1862, his son Willie dies of typhoid fever. Willie is 11 years old, bright and gentle, his father's favorite. The illness comes on suddenly, and for days Abraham sits beside the boy's bed, holding his hand, hoping desperately for improvement that never comes. When Willie dies, Abraham is shattered. He weeps openly, something Victorian men were not supposed to do, and for weeks afterwards, he returns to the room where Willie's body lay, shutting himself inside to grieve in private. Mary is devastated beyond consolation. She wears black for years afterwards, never fully recovers from the loss. Their youngest son, Tad, becomes even more precious, and Abraham indulges him perhaps too much, letting the boy run wild through the White House, interrupting meetings, playing with office equipment, making chaos wherever he goes. But Abraham cannot bring himself to discipline him, cannot bear to add any more sorrow to what the child has already experienced. The war grinds on. In 1864, Abraham runs for re-election, and for much of the summer, it seems certain he will lose. The war is not going well. Casualties continue to mount. The North is tired, discouraged, ready for peace almost at any price. Abraham writes a memo and seals it, making his cabinet members sign it without reading it. Inside, he has written that he expects to lose the election, and that he will work with the incoming president to save the Union before Inauguration Day, because the new president will not be willing to do so afterward. But then, the tide turns. General Sherman captures Atlanta. General Sheridan wins victories in the Shenandoah Valley. Suddenly the war seems winnable after all. In November, Abraham is re-elected decisively, carrying all but 3 states. The people have affirmed their support for seeing the war through to victory, for ending slavery, for preserving the Union no matter the cost. In his second inaugural address, delivered in March 1865, with the war nearly over, Abraham speaks with profound moral and theological depth about the meaning of the conflict. He suggests that the war may be God's punishment on both North and South for the sin of slavery, that the blood spilled by the lash must be paid for by blood spilled in battle. And he concludes with words of remarkable compassion and vision. With malice toward none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right, as God gives us to see the right, let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow and his orphan, to do all we may achieve, and cherish a just and lasting peace among ourselves and with all nations. He is thinking about reconciliation now, about how to bring the rebellious states back into the Union without vindictiveness, how to heal wounds that have cut so deep. He speaks of treating the defeated South generously, of helping them rebuild, of letting Confederate soldiers return to their homes and farms without punishment. Some in his own party think he is too lenient, that the South should be made to suffer for the rebellion. But Abraham has seen enough suffering. He wants only peace now, peace and the slow work of healing. Feel yourself sinking deeper still, your breathing slow and even, your mind drifting in that space between waking and sleeping, where images flow freely and time loses its usual structure. The story continues, but you are floating with it now, barely tethered to consciousness. In early April 1865, Richmond falls. The Confederate capital is abandoned, and Union troops march in through streets lined with empty buildings and scattered debris. Abraham visits the fallen city a few days later, walking through streets where he is recognized immediately. Freed slaves rush to him, trying to touch him, calling him their liberator. He is uncomfortable with their reverence, keeps telling them not to kneel before him, that they should kneel only before God. But their joy and gratitude are overwhelming, and he walks among them with tears in his eyes, overwhelmed by what this moment means, the end of slavery, the end of the war, the beginning of something new. He returns to Washington, exhausted but hopeful. The war is essentially over. General Lee will surrender to General Grant at Appomattox Courthouse on April 9. Other Confederate armies will follow suit in the coming weeks. After 4 years of bloodshed, after more than 600,000 deaths, the Union has survived. The house divided has been made whole again, though the scars will take generations to heal. On the evening of April 11th, Abraham gives a speech from a White House window to a crowd gathered on the lawn below. It is not a triumphant speech, not a celebration of military victory. Instead, he talks about the complicated work ahead, how to reconstruct the South, how to bring the rebellious states back into proper relationship with the Union, how to handle the question of voting rights for the freed slaves. He suggests that some black men, those who are educated or who have fought for the Union, should be given the vote. In the crowd listening is a young actor named John Wilkes Booth. When he hears Lincoln suggest voting rights for black men, he turns to his companion and says, "That means Negro citizenship. Now by God, I'll put him through." That is the last speech he will ever make. 3 days later, on the evening of April 14th, 1865, Abraham and Mary attend a play at Ford's Theater. It is Good Friday. The play is a comedy called Our American Cousin, light entertainment after years of darkness. Abraham is tired but agrees to go because Mary wants to, and because his presence at public events helps signal that peace has returned, that normal life can resume. They sit in a box above the stage, decorated with flags and bunting. A guard is supposed to be outside the door, but he wanders away, perhaps to get a drink, perhaps simply because he is bored. Abraham sits in a rocking chair, Mary beside him, and they watch the play unfold below. At one point, Mary takes his hand and whispers, "What will Miss Harris think of my hanging on to you so?" Abraham replies, "She won't think anything about it." They are the last words Mary will ever hear him speak. At 10:15 p.m. during the third act of the play, John Wilkes Booth enters the box. He is a well-known actor, and no one questions his presence in the theater. He knows the play, knows when the laughter will be loudest, knows the exact moment when a single gunshot might go unnoticed. He steps behind Abraham, raises a Derringer pistol, and fires one shot into the back of Abraham's head, just behind the left ear. Let yourself remain calm as you hear this. You are safe, comfortable, drifting in that space where stories are real, but cannot hurt you. The tragedy unfolds like a painting you are viewing from a distance, vivid but contained. Abraham slumps forward. Mary screams. Booth leaps from the box to the stage below, catching his spur on one of the flags and breaking his leg as he lands. But adrenaline carries him forward, and he disappears into the night while chaos erupts in the theater. People are screaming, shouting, running. A young army doctor named Charles Leal pushes through the crowd and climbs into the box. He finds Abraham unconscious, barely breathing, blood seeping from the wound. Abraham Lincoln will never regain consciousness. They carry him across the street to a boarding house, to a small bedroom on the first floor. The bed is too short for his long frame, so they lay him diagonally across it. Mary sits beside him, weeping and praying. Cabinet members arrive, senators, generals, all crowding into the small room or waiting in adjacent rooms. His breathing is labored, irregular. The wound is mortal. Everyone knows it, though no one wants to say it aloud. Through the night, they keep vigil. Rain begins to fall outside, a soft, steady rain that drums on the windows and runs down the glass in rivulets. Candles burn low and are replaced. Mary is led from the room periodically when her grief becomes too loud, then returns to sit beside him again. His son Robert stands at the head of the bed, his hand on his father's shoulder. As dawn approaches on April 15th, Abraham's breathing becomes more shallow, more irregular. The pauses between breaths grow longer. At 7:22 in the morning, as pale light begins to filter through the rain-streaked windows, his breathing stops. For a long moment, no one moves. Then Secretary of War Edwin Stanton, who has been Lincoln's right hand throughout the war, speaks. Now, he belongs to the ages. The news spreads through Washington within hours, then ripples outward across the nation like waves from a stone dropped in still water. Church bells begin to toll in cities and towns across the North. People emerge from their houses and stand in the streets, weeping, unable to believe it. Flags are lowered to half-staff. Black cloth appears on buildings, on lampposts, on doorways. The nation that was celebrating victory only days ago is now plunged into mourning. Abraham's body is taken back to the White House, where it lies in state in the East Room. Thousands file past the open casket, paying their respects. Mary is upstairs, prostrate with grief, unable to attend the funeral service. Tad moves through the White House like a ghost, unable to understand why his father will not wake up. Then begins the long journey home to Springfield. The funeral train travels 1,652 miles. It's over 13 days, retracing in reverse the route Abraham took to Washington 4 years earlier. The train stops in major cities: Baltimore, Philadelphia, New York, Cleveland, Chicago, and at each stop, enormous crowds gather. Hundreds of thousands of people view the body. Millions more line the tracks as the train passes, standing in the rain and the wind, holding candles and lanterns through the night, singing hymns, their faces wet with tears. You can see them there, these ordinary people, farmers and shopkeepers and factory workers and freed slaves, all of them standing in silence as the train passes. They have lost something they did not fully appreciate until it was gone. This tall, awkward man from the frontier, this man who split rails and taught himself law and told funny stories and carried the weight of the nation through its darkest hour, he was theirs, and now he is gone. The funeral train reaches Springfield on May 3rd. The next day, Abraham Lincoln is buried in Oak Ridge Cemetery, laid to rest beside his sons, Eddie and Willie. Thousands attend the funeral. All across the nation, people gather in churches and town squares for memorial services. Preachers speak of sacrifice and martyrdom, of how Lincoln died on Good Friday like Christ, giving his life to save the nation. The man is already becoming myth, already being transformed from human to hero, from president to saint. But Abraham Lincoln was not a saint. He was a man, complicated, flawed, marked by melancholy and doubt, capable of pettiness and political calculation. He told off-colored jokes that made some people uncomfortable. He could be ruthless when he thought the situation required it, suspending habeas corpus and imprisoning critics without trial. He moved slowly on emancipation, waited until he thought the country was ready, put political considerations ahead of moral urgency in ways that frustrated abolitionists. And yet, he grew. Throughout his life, he kept learning, kept evolving, kept opening himself to new understanding. The man who suggested colonization for freed slaves in 1862 was hosting black leaders at the White House in 1864, listening to their concerns, incorporating their perspectives into his thinking. The politician who carefully avoided taking strong positions on slavery in the 1850s became the president who issued the Emancipation Proclamation and pushed for the 13th Amendment. The frontier lawyer who knew little of military strategy became a commander-in-chief who understood the big picture better than most of his generals. He carried the burden of freedom, not just his own freedom to rise from poverty to the presidency, but the freedom of millions of enslaved people, the freedom of a nation to govern itself, the freedom of future generations to inherit a country united and whole. And that burden was almost unbearably heavy. You could see it in his face, especially in the photographs from 1864 and 1865, where he looks decades older than his 56 years. His face deeply lined, his eyes haunted by all he has seen and done. Let yourself sink deeper now into perfect comfort, perfect rest. Your body is completely relaxed, your mind drifting peacefully. The story is nearly complete, and you can let it carry you into sleep, into dreams, into the deep rest you deserve. In the years after his death, Abraham Lincoln's reputation grows until he is widely considered the greatest American president, the man who saved the Union and freed the slaves. His words, the Gettysburg Address, the second inaugural, dozens of letters and speeches, are memorized by school children and quoted by leaders around the world. Monuments are built to his memory. His face is carved into mountains and printed on currency. His name becomes synonymous with American democracy itself. But perhaps the truest memorial is simpler and quieter than all of that. It is in the fact that the Union he fought to preserve still exists, imperfect and often struggling, but existing nonetheless. It is in the fact that slavery was abolished and never returned, that the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments became part of the Constitution, slowly, painfully, imperfectly expanding the promise of freedom to more and more people. It is in every election where ordinary citizens choose their leaders, every courtroom where justice is sought, every moment when the experiment of self-government continues. Abraham Lincoln believed that America was not just a country, but an idea. The idea that people could govern themselves, that all persons were created equal, that freedom was not the privilege of the few, but the right of all. He believed this idea was worth fighting for, worth dying for, and he gave everything he had to preserve it. And on quiet nights, if you listen carefully, you can almost hear the echo of his voice, that high-pitched, earnest voice from the frontier, speaking words he wrote in the darkness of 1862, when the war seemed lost and the future seemed impossible. The fiery trial through which we pass will light us down, in honor or dishonor, to the latest generation. We shall nobly save, or meanly lose, the last best hope of earth. The morning after Abraham Lincoln died, the rain stopped and the sun came out over Washington. Birds sang in the trees around the White House, unaware that anything had changed. The Potomac River flowed as it always had, carrying water toward the sea. Somewhere, a child laughed. Somewhere, someone planted seeds in a garden, expecting harvest in the fall. Life continued, as it always does, flowing forward like a river, carrying the living toward whatever future awaits them. The war was over. The Union was saved. Slavery was abolished. These things were real, accomplished, permanent changes in the world. And though the man who guided the nation through its darkest hour was gone, his work remained. You can rest now. You can let yourself drift into sleep, knowing that even in the darkest times, even when the burden seems too heavy to bear, there are people who rise to meet the moment. There are people who carry the weight with courage and compassion, who grow into their responsibilities, who sacrifice everything to preserve what they believe in. Abraham Lincoln was one of those people. A boy from a Kentucky cabin who became a president. A self-taught lawyer who became the great emancipator. A man of profound sadness who held on to hope even when hope seemed foolish. A human being, flawed and finite, who did something extraordinary with the years he was given. And now, in this quiet moment, you can honor his memory simply by resting, by letting yourself be held by the darkness and the stillness, by trusting that morning will come, that the work continues, that the burden of freedom, though heavy, is carried by many hands across many generations. Feel yourself sinking deeper into sleep now. Feel the weight of your body pressing into the mattress, the softness of your pillow beneath your head. Your breathing is slow and deep and even. Your mind is quiet, drifting through peaceful darkness. Outside your window, the world continues its ancient rhythms. The stars wheel slowly across the sky, indifferent to human struggles and triumphs. The earth turns, carrying you through the night toward morning. And somewhere in that vast dark, among all the souls who have lived and died and shaped the world we inhabit, Abraham Lincoln rests. His work is finished. His burden has been laid down. The war is over. The slaves are free. The Union is preserved. He gave all that he had, and it was enough. And you too can rest now. You have carried your own burdens through this day. You have done what you could. And now it is time to let it all go, to surrender to sleep, to trust that you will wake in the morning, ready to carry on. The story is complete. The long journey from that Kentucky cabin to that boarding house in Washington is done. The man who walked that path has taken his place in memory, in history, in the long procession of souls who tried to make the world a little better than they found it. Sleep now. Rest deeply and peacefully. Let the weight of the day fall away. Let your mind drift into dreams, into the peaceful dark where healing happens and strength returns. The bells have stopped tolling. The funeral train has reached its destination. The body has been laid to rest beneath Illinois soil, and spring flowers are beginning to bloom above the grave. All is well. All is quiet. All is at peace. And you can rest now, held safely in this moment, in this breath, in this deep and gentle darkness that asks nothing of you but surrender. Sleep, rest, dream. The burden of freedom has been carried for today. Tomorrow it will be carried again, by other hands, in other times. But tonight, there is only peace, only stillness, only the slow, steady rhythm of your breathing, carrying you deeper and deeper into rest. Sleep now. Let go. Abraham Lincoln's story is told, and you have walked beside him through all his years, through all his struggles and triumphs and sorrow. You have seen what one person can do when they refuse to abandon their principles, when they carry impossible burdens with courage and compassion. And now his watch is ended, and yours is ended for this day, and there is nothing more to do but rest. The lamplight fades. The voices grow distant. The images dissolve into darkness, and you drift, peacefully, gently, into the deep and healing sleep you deserve. Rest well. Sleep deeply. The story is complete, and you are safe, and all is well. Good night.